The highway lights bled past the tinted windows like melting stars, but Zara saw none of it. Her fingers were twisted together in her lap, knuckles pale against her dark brown skin. The ivory lace of her fitted dress scratched against her collarbone like a whisper of warning. She was a girl being driven toward a destiny she had never written for herself, toward a life that had been negotiated over her head in hushed voices and desperate signatures. Her family was drowning, the kind of drowning that swallows generations whole, that reaches back to Abuja and forward into every future they had ever dared to dream. And she, Zara Adeyemi, 20 years old and still carrying the softness of a girl who had never truly been loved, was the only lifeboat left. The arrangement had come through lawyers with cold eyes and briefcases that smelled like leather and secrets. A merger, they called it, a union. A marriage, but not to one man, to two. The black car slowed and stopped before a pair of steel gates so tall they seemed to scrape the underside of the Seoul sky. They parted like the pages of a story she was being written into without her consent. The driveway curved elegantly through gardens pruned to an almost unsettling perfection, and at the end of it stood a structure that was less a home and more a statement. Towers of dark glass and pale stone that caught the moonlight and threw it back at the world like a challenge. This was the residence of Seon and Ryeon Kwon, the twin sons of Korea's most feared criminal empire. Men wrapped in rumor, in legend, in a power so absolute it had reached across oceans to pull one Nigerian girl into their orbit. Zara pressed her palm flat against her sternum, as if she could physically quiet her heart. She was their newest possession. A woman in a charcoal blazer met her at the entrance without a smile, without a greeting, without a single word of comfort. She was led through corridors of polished obsidian floors and walls hung with art that looked like it cost more than her father's entire lifetime of work. The house breathed cold and quiet around her, beautiful the way a mausoleum is beautiful. Then a door was opened and warmth spilled out into the cold like something alive. A sitting room. Real fire in a real fireplace. Books climbing every wall, their spines 100 different colors. "They will be with you," the woman said, and then she was gone. Zara stood alone in the center of the room and let herself shake. She had never been kissed, not properly, not by anyone who meant it. She had grown up in a household of second-hand textbooks and her mother's jollof on Sunday afternoons, and the particular joy of learning, of staying quiet and small and hopeful. Love had always existed at a distance for her, something she observed through drama episodes on a cracked phone screen, something that happened to prettier, bolder girls. Now she was standing in the middle of a palace in a country whose language she did not speak, waiting for two men who were now, by law, her husbands. The word sat in her throat like a stone. The door across the room opened. They entered together, shoulder to shoulder, and the air in the room changed. They were mirrors of each other, both tall, both broad across the shoulders, both sculpted with the particular arrogance of men who had never once been told no. Dark hair, sharp jaws, identical faces arranged by the same precise hand. And yet Zara knew, from the very first breath, that they were entirely different creatures wearing the same face. The one on the right moved first. He walked like music, easy and rhythmic, with a slow smile already climbing his face. His eyes were dark and warm, lit from somewhere deep inside. He extended a hand to her the way someone offers a hand to a person standing at the edge of something frightening. "Zara," he said, and even her name sounded different in his voice, gentle, like he was trying not to startle her. "I'm Ryeon. We've been looking forward to meeting you. Please, don't be afraid of us." A complicated little laugh almost escaped her. Don't be afraid, as if that were a switch she could simply flip. Her eyes moved, almost against her will, to the one on the left, Seon. He had not moved from the doorway. His arms were folded across his chest, and his gaze was already on her, had probably been on her since the moment the door opened. His eyes were the same shade as his brother's, but they operated like an entirely different instrument. Where Ryan's were open windows, Sion's were locked vaults. He studied her with the focused, unhurried patience of a man who had never needed to rush anything in his life. He did not smile. Ryan filled the silence with warmth, talking about the house, about Seoul, about the view from the upper floors on a clear morning. He was trying to give her something to hold on to, and she was grateful even as she kept drifting back to Sion, who remained still as a painting on the far side of the room. Then Sion moved. One step, then another, deliberate and slow, until he stood close enough that she could feel the gravity of him. He was not performing for her the way the world performed. He simply was. "There are things you need to understand," he said. His voice was low and unhurried, a sound that did not need volume to command a room. Ryan fell quiet beside her. Sion's eyes stayed fixed on her face. "This arrangement is not a story you get to rewrite. You belong to both of us, not to him, not to me, to us. This house, this life, our bed." He let the words land. "Tonight and every night, you are ours, completely." The statement was not cruel, it was simply final, the closing of a door she had not realized was still open. Dinner that evening was an exercise in contrast. Ryan poured her water before she asked, pressed food onto her plate with recommendations and small jokes, asked her questions about Abuja that were so specific and so genuine she found herself answering longer than she intended. Sion ate in silence, his attention moving between his food and her face, like he was reading a document he hadn't yet decided what to do with. When they walked her up the sweeping staircase afterward, one on each side of her, her legs moved through what felt like water. The master suite was its own world, a bed like a country, windows that made the glittering city below feel like something they owned. Zara stood in the middle of it all and could not find the floor beneath her feet. But they were different here, away from formality. Ryan's charm became something quieter, more careful. He came to her first, tucking a loose coil of her hair back with a fingertip so gentle it made her eyes sting. "We will not hurt you. That is never what this is." Then Sion was behind her, and his hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face upward with a firmness that was not unkind. His thumb moved slowly along her cheekbone. A shiver moved through her like weather. It was Ryan who kissed her first, soft, unhurried, a first kiss that tasted like patience. Something warm bloomed beneath her ribs. Then Sion turned her face toward his. His kiss was nothing like his brother's. It was deep and certain, and it asked nothing because it assumed everything. She gripped his jacket just to stay standing. They worked in a language built between two bodies that had shared every room since birth. Ryan's hands were steady and teaching, gentle guides that showed her what her own skin was capable of feeling. Sion's were sure and possessive, mapping her as though she were territory he intended to know completely. The silk of her dress pooled around her feet, and they looked at her, and neither of them looked disappointed. Ryan exhaled like she had taken his breath. Sion was simply silent in the way a man is silent when he has no words large enough for what he feels. When the final threshold of the night was crossed, it was Ryan whose warmth surrounded her, whose voice stayed low in her ear, steady and sweet. But her eyes found Sion, who sat close, one hand holding hers with a grip that said he would not let the current take her anywhere without him. When she finally surrendered, it was not to pain, but to something enormous and unknown, a beginning dressed in the clothes of an ending. She lay between them in the deep quiet of after, Ryan already softened into sleep, with his arm curved around her waist like a crescent moon. Sion was awake. He always would be, she would learn. His hand rested at her hip, a silent declaration. She was not the same girl who had arrived at those steel gates. She was not sure yet who she was becoming, but she closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she did not feel alone. The days built themselves into a life she had never planned and could not have imagined. Ryun was everywhere, filling every room he entered with a particular brightness. He took her to floating markets on the Han River and narrated everything with the enthusiasm of a man who found the world genuinely delightful. He dragged her through boutiques in Cheongdam-dong and had the particular talent of knowing which things made her eyes change, buying them before she could protest. He held her hand in public, kissed her cheek over breakfast, told her in 3 different ways each day that she was extraordinary. His love was sunshine. It required nothing from her but willingness to stand in it. Sion was the tide. He disappeared into the architecture of his work for hours, sometimes the whole of a day. The door to his private office closed against the noise of ordinary life. At dinner, he offered little conversation. He did not arrive at her door with flowers or surprises wrapped in ribbon. Early on, Zara told herself his silence was indifference. She built small walls around herself to protect against what she had decided was his rejection. Then she began to see the smaller things. She mentioned once, only once in passing, that she missed the sound of Afro beats on a Sunday morning, that it used to come through the walls of her neighbor's apartment back home, and it always made the morning feel alive. 3 days later, a wireless speaker appeared on her bedside table, already connected to a playlist that began with Burna Boy. Sion was at the opposite end of the house when she found it. He never mentioned it. At a formal event filled with faces that looked through her, it was Ryan who danced with her and introduced her to everyone with the pride of a man showing off something he loved. But when a man in an expensive suit stood too close and let his eyes move over her in a way that made her stomach turn, it was Sion who materialized at her side, like weather you didn't see coming. The man in the suit found somewhere else to be without a word being exchanged. Sion's hand settled briefly at the small of her back, guiding her away, and then it was gone. He never announced his protection. He simply made the world safer and walked away. The war inside Zara began quietly, the way most important wars do. With Ryun, she was happy, genuinely and easily happy, in the way you are happy on a long afternoon with nowhere to be. But in every room that Sion entered, she became more awake. Her pulse climbed. She was hungry for his attention in a way that frightened her, cataloging his rare touches like a woman who knew something was scarce and could not stop reaching for it. His kisses, when they came, arrived like storms. They rearranged things inside her that Ryan's sweetness hadn't touched. She loved them, both of them, completely and at the same time, and in ways so different it seemed impossible that one body could hold both. She loved Ryan the way you love a song that makes every ordinary moment feel significant. She loved Sion the way you love something that scares you into becoming larger than you were. And the impossibility of it began to pull her under. She withdrew, became a quieter version of herself. She watched Ryan's brow furrow with worry, watched Sion's jaw tighten with something he would not name. She was becoming the fracture in the thing they were trying to build, and she could not figure out how to stop. The rain had been falling for an hour when it finally broke open. They were in the sitting room where it had all begun. Ryan was talking about something, his voice light and reaching for her. Sion stood at the fireplace, turned slightly away, a wall in the shape of a man. Zara sat with her hands in her lap and felt the grief of it press up through her chest and into her throat. And then she was standing, and her voice was coming out cracked and shaking. "I can't keep doing this." The room went very still. "I love you," she said, and the tears arrived before she finished the sentence. "Both of you, but not the same way, and I can't figure out if that's a betrayal or just the truth, and I don't know how to live inside that without it destroying me." A hand closed around her wrist, Sion's. He had crossed the room before she registered him moving. His grip was steady, his eyes searching her face with an intensity that felt like being held up to the light. "What exactly," he said slowly, "do you think you are supposed to be choosing?" Ryan came to stand before her, and his voice, when he spoke, was the softest she had ever heard it. "We are not the same man, Zara. We have never been the same man. We don't love you the same way either. Why would we expect you to love us the same way back?" Sion's grip on her wrist became something gentler, a hold, an anchor. He looked at her with those locked vault eyes, and for the first time, something moved behind them, something large and unguarded. You are not two women split between two men. You are one woman who belongs to one family. Your heart is not divided. It is whole. It has always been whole. The words arrived in her like sunlight into a room that had been shut for too long. She looked at Ryan's warm, patient face. She looked at Sion's fierce, careful one, and the war inside her simply put down its weapons. You are two halves of one world, she said, her voice steadying as she spoke. I love all of it. I'm not choosing one of you. I am choosing this. All of this. I choose us. What grew from that evening was something sturdier than the arrangement that had brought them together. The fog left the glass house and did not return. The love between the three of them settled into its true shape. Not a competition, not a compromise, but a triangle so perfectly balanced that nothing could tip it. In the bedroom, the shift was profound. There was no more careful division, no taking of turns. There was only the three of them, moving together like a conversation that had finally found its real subject. Ryun's tenderness went deeper, freed from the fear of comparison. Sion's ferocity became a gift he gave openly, no longer rationed. Together, they made her feel like someone had rewritten the definition of the word beloved and used her name as the example. Time moved the way it does when you are finally in the right life. The glass house filled with noise. Two small boys who ran through the corridors and left fingerprints on every low window. One of them had Ryun's laugh, wide open and unself-conscious. The other had Sion's eyes, serious and searching, always watching the world like he was preparing a verdict. Both of them had Zara's spirit, stubborn and bright and entirely their own. She stood in the garden on a gold-soaked afternoon and watched them chase each other through the flowers. Ryun came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin finding her shoulder, his lips brushing her temple. "Look at what we made," he whispered, like it was still a miracle to him after all this time. Sion came to stand beside her, not behind, beside, as he always did, a presence rather than a performance. He didn't reach for her waist, he reached for her hand. His fingers closed around hers slowly, like a sentence being written with intention. She felt him look at her before she turned to see it. And when she did turn, those vaulted eyes were open, wide open, filled with something that had no name in any language, but needed none. They were not an arrangement anymore. They were not a contract or a compromise or a curiosity for the world to puzzle over. They were a family built in a shape the world had no blueprint for, and they had built it anyway, with love that was honest enough to be different and brave enough to be shared. The sun found Ryun, the moon found Sion, and Zara moved through all of it, the day and the night, the warmth and the depth, the laughter and the silence, whole and loved and entirely herself. If this story reached inside you and rearranged something, if you felt every heartbeat of Zara's impossible, beautiful love, then you belong right here on this channel. We tell the stories the world doesn't have words for yet. Love that crosses oceans, breaks every mold, and builds something permanent from the wreckage of what was supposed to be impossible. There are more stories waiting for you, more hearts to root for, more romances that will make you forget to breathe. Subscribe right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss the moment a new story begins. Your next unforgettable love is one click away. Don't let it start without you.